7th grade math, test 15, study guide, problem number 1. The ratio of pigs to cows on a farm is 3 to 4. How many pigs are there if there are 28 cows? Now, we don't need to convert our ratio here because the question asks us pigs to cows, and the ratio given was also pigs to cows. So I just put pigs over cows, and then I'm missing pigs for the second question. They tell me cows, so I set up my proportion. We cross multiply. 3 times 28 equals 4 times x, which is 4x. Simplify. 28 times 3 is 84. Divide both sides by 4, and the answer is 21. 21 pigs. And as always, for all these problems, pause the video, do this problem, and check and see if you got what I have, and then do it again until you get it right. Okay? So, let's move on to the next one, number 2. Number 2 says, a company raised the price of an item from $12.50 to $15. What's the percent of increase? We got to find the amount of increase first of all, which means I have to subtract. So when I subtract these two, 15 take away 12.50 is 2.50. So it increased by 2.50. So this question is really asking us, $2.50 is what percent of 12.50? Anything to do with percent, we use percent proportion. Percent proportion, we put is over of, new over old, and then percent over 100. I don't have the percent because they said what percent. So once I have a proportion, I know how to solve proportions. I cross multiply. 2.50 times 100, which is just simple. You just move the decimal 2 times, right? And 12.5 times x is 12.5x. Divide both sides by 12.5. And then the division's over here. If you have any issues with that, you can check my work here. And you should have got 20, which is x in the percent spot, or 20%. Nice thing about percent proportion, we don't have to convert decimals to percent. It's already done for us. Next question, number 3 says, an item costs $45 and has a 6.5% sales tax. How much will you pay with tax included? Round to the nearest cent if necessary. So we're going to pay $45 and or plus 6.5% of $45. So I can find those two. I can find 6.5% of 45 using the same proportion, right? Percent proportion. Or, since I'm going to add them together anyways, I might as well just add the percents together, right? 100%, which is $45, and 6.5% is 106.5%. So why don't I just find 106.5% of 45 and get it done within one shot? So what I do then is I cross multiply, and I go 100 times x is 100x, 45 times 106.5. Here's the work here if you have any issues with that. But pause the video and check that yourself. Make sure you got the same thing. Now I multiply 45 times 106.5, 4,792 and 5/10. Divide both sides by 100. Remember, dividing by 100 just means move the decimal 2 times this way. But if I'm going to round to the nearest cent, I look to the decimal to the right of that. If it's 5 or more, which it is, then I round this up 1. So it's about $47.93. Next problem, we're going to write a fraction. We're going to write the decimal for the fraction. 29 over 2. So I divide in and out. I put the 29 in and the 12 out. Did I say 2? 29 over 12. I put the 29 in and the 12 out. I put my decimal here and bring it up. Well, 12 goes into that 2 times. Subtract. Bring down a 0. 12 goes into 54 times. Subtract. Bring down a 0. 12 goes into 21 times. Subtract. Bring down a 0. And when I multiply those two, I get, or when I subtract those two, I'm going to get 8 again, and that's going to start repeating, okay? But we can stop right there. We can actually stop because we're going to round to the nearest hundredth. So I have 2 decimal spaces, but I need 3 if I'm going to round to 2 decimal spaces. So I have enough to say that's about 2.42, okay? Number 5. An $4 item went on sale for 20% off. What is the new price? So, in other words, I can find 20% of $4 and subtract it, or I can simply find 80% of $4, right? Because if you're taking 20% off, you're paying 80%. Why don't we just do it in one shot, okay? So we'll deal with the percent. 80% of 4 means I use percent proportion. Percent over 100 is over of. What is 80% of 4? So I cross multiply 4 times 80 and 100 times x. 4 times 80 is 320. Divide both sides by the number in front of x. Dividing by 100 means move the decimal 2 times. I'm going to pay $3.20 if it's 20% off. Alright, so number 6 says 4/5 minus 1/2. I need a common denominator before I can add or subtract, but I'm going to make this subtraction into addition by adding the opposite, drawing 2 sticks. We talked about that in class. I need the same bottom number, so I look at my bigger number, right, and do the multiples. 5 times 1, 5 times 2, 5 times 3. And then I see, when's the first time 2 is going to go into one of those numbers? And the answer is 10. My LCD is 10. So I multiply 5 times 2 to get 10, but if I do it to the bottom, I have to do it to the top. In other words, 4/5 is the same fraction as 2 times 4 is 8 over 2 times 5 is 10. 8/10 is 4/5. Do the same thing over here, but I got to use a 5 this time to get my denominator of 10. Now that I have the same bottom number, they're the same size pieces, I can add the numerators. 8 plus negative 5 is 3, and I keep the same bottom number. And there's my answer. Number 7, a line goes through the origin. So if it's a line that goes through the origin, it is proportional. So I can write the equation simply by putting y over x and simplifying. My slope is negative 2, and put the 2 in front of the x, and that's the answer right there. Number 8, during a football game, it said that the Rams gained 1 yard, that's positive 1. Gained another yard, that's positive 1. Gained 2 more yards, that's positive 2. Lost 10 is negative 10. Add up all your positives, add up all your negatives, subtract those 2, and the integer that would represent the net yardage is negative 6. 9, we have to write 5/100ths as a fraction. So I put it as 5 over 100. That's 5/100ths, isn't it? And then I use my factor trees, cross out my 1s, and I see that simplified it's 1 over 20. 1 over 20 is the same as 5/100ths. 10 says, which number below is equivalent to the opposite of negative 7 over 2? Alright, so first of all, I count all my negatives. There's 1, 2 negatives. Well, if there's 2 negatives, it's positive, so I simplify that first of all. But I have to say which of these are the same, so I'm going to write it, I could write it in different ways, right? So I'm going to go ahead and convert this to a decimal by dividing, and convert it to a decimal and a fraction. Okay? Mixed number. So I divide in and out in both ways, right? One puts a decimal, the other just puts the remainder up top, divides it here, and I see 1, 2, 3 different ways to write this number. So which of these numbers down here are the same? Take a look. This one doesn't work because that's negative. This is positive. It simplifies to positive. This doesn't work because there's 1, 2, 3 negatives. That simplifies to negative. That's not the same. This is positive and this is positive. However, the decimal is 3.5, not 3.2. The answer is D. 11. We're going to write a fraction in between 1/10 and 1/20th on a number line. Alright, so if I want to figure out what's in between those, I want to give them the same size pieces, or in other words, I can just take this number over here and go 20 over 20, take this number here, 10, and go 10 over 10, and I see that another way to say 1/10 is 220ths. These are the same fraction, right? This is reduced, this is not. And 1/20th is the same as 10 over 200, so I can see a number in between those two. Well, 11 over 200 is in between them, 12 over 200, 13 over 200, etc., until I get to 20. So the answers that they gave me, only one of them worked, 17 over 100, over 200. The other ones didn't work. They were either too small or too big. We have to enter the value for C that makes the expression equivalent, makes this equivalent to this, or makes this equal to this. So what I'm going to do then is I'm going to distribute first. 1.7 times 2x. 1.7 times 2 is 3.4, and then put the x. 1.7 times negative 2.3 is negative 3.1. And I really should have did the rule for subtraction there, right? 1, 2, 1, 2. So what goes here for C? Oh, I did the rule for subtraction down here, didn't I? So what goes there for C? Well, in order for these to be the same, C would have to be negative 3.91. 13, we're going to simplify this. I'm going to distribute. So I'm going to do the rule for subtraction and then do 5 times 7.4. Oh, actually, you know what? Since there's no letters in, no variables in here, we're just going to simplify these two. Let's go ahead and take these two and do teams over here. They're opposite teams, so I subtract them, right? And there are more positives than negatives. So 7.4 plus negative 5.9 is 1.5. I'm going to simplify that interior first because I can, because they're actually like terms. Then I'm going to multiply 5 times 1.4. That's the easiest way to do this problem. The answer is 7.5. 14, we're going to simplify this. So I have 4 x's and a negative x. I have 3 and a negative 8. So 4 x's and a negative x is 3x. 3 and a negative 8 is negative 5. That's done. We can write this rule for subtraction backwards, right? Plus a negative. Another way to say plus a negative is just minus. 15, we're going to simplify this expression right here. Since I have a subtraction problem right here, I'll do the rule for subtraction. Okay, rule for subtraction, 1, 2, 1, 2. I'm going to distribute here. 2 times negative x is negative 2x. 2 times 2.9 is 5.8, so I distributed first. Now I combine like terms. I add my x's to my x's. They're both negatives, they're on the same team, so I add them together. 2 plus 1.75 is 3.75, but they're both negatives. Negative 1 and 15 hundredths plus 5 and 8 tenths is positive 4 and 65 hundredths. So that's simplified. I can't do any more. 16, I'm going to solve this equation. And we learned in class, when we have a number over a letter like this, we can simplify this equation simply by doing the inverse operation. So divide by 5, the opposite is to multiply by 5. So in order to get rid of a number on the bottom, just multiply both sides by that number, because watch, these ones cross out. 2.1 times 5 is 10.5. K has to be 10.5. 17, we're going to solve this equation right here. So it's kind of like this one, but there's a fraction as a coefficient instead of the variable being on top in the numerator. So what do we do when there's a fraction in front? Well, we learned in class we multiply by the reciprocal of that fraction, right? We turn that fraction upside down. Negative 1 over 7 is the same as negative 7 over 1, which is just negative 7. So I multiply both sides by negative 7. That will cross this out. That will automatically make that coefficient go away, but I have to do it over here too to get my answer. 18, I'm solving this two-step equation. So I need to know what letter that is to make this side the same as 50. And the way I do that is I get the letter by itself, I isolate it. So I work farthest away from y first. So I separate my left from my right side, right? And then I look and I see my y is on this side, so I got to move the 6 and the 2. But I'm going to move the 2 first, right? I work farthest away from the variable first. If it's 2, I subtract 2. If I have 2 and I take away 2, it's gone. But I have to do it over here too to keep the balance, to keep it equal. 50 take away 2 is 48. Now I got to get rid of the 6. 6 times y, well, if I do the inverse operation, that's divide. 6 over 6 is 1. I can cross out my 1s. I got my y by itself. That's what I wanted. But I have to divide 48 by 6 also. My answer is 8. If I put an 8 here, this will equal 50. 19. 19, we're going to solve this inequality. Same as solving equations, right? The only difference is if I multiply or divide by a negative number, then I have to reverse the inequality. Aside from that, everything else is the exact same. So I divide both sides by 17. How do I divide 5 by 17? I put 5 over 17. So what this means is, see, if you say the x first, because this is what your answer means, my answers are my x is less than 5 over 17. Now I can read this. 5 over 17 is greater than x, which means x is less than 5 over 17, right? If I said 8 is greater than 2, that's like saying 2 is less than 8, right? So I can read it the other way. And the reason that's important is because you don't know which order they're going to put it sometimes. Sometimes they put it this order, this order. But you got to understand, these are the same thing. Look, the amount is away from the x here. The amount is away from the x here too. So the answer was D. A wasn't the answer because of the equal sign. B wasn't the answer because, look, the mouse trying to eat the X on B. And C is not the answer because they had the number flipped upside down. Last problem. We're going to solve this equation. Like I said earlier, solving equalities, same thing. But if you divide by a negative, look, we're dividing by a negative right now. We have to reverse the inequality. So we have to pick which graph is the same. So if I say my X first, X is greater than negative 2. Oops, I said that wrong. Greater than or equal to negative 2. So my answers are everything bigger than negative 2 or the same as negative 2. That means I need a solid dot, right? I need a solid dot, not an open dot. That's what this means. And this means that. So I look at my answers. A, this shows greater than or equal to negative 2. B does not, because that's less than and it's not equal to. That's D, sorry. B does not, because it is greater than, but it's not equal to, because it's open dot. And C, it's solid dot, but it's less than, so the answer has to be A. Alright, hope that helped.